my Kennians, and welcome to a new episode of Discovering Classic Doctor Who. Now, in accordance with the comments you all left on the only the previous episode so far, because as of the time of this recording, the second episode hasn't gone up yet. But instead of doing the classic era episode by episode, I am going to be doing it in parts. So, this four-part first serial of the first Doctor is being split into three parts now, because I'm going to watch both The Forest of Fear and The Firemaker. Both in this episode, and then we'll give my thoughts on the both of those at the end, as well as sort of my overall feelings on An Unearthly Child, which is the main title of this serial by itself. So, let's get right into it and begin with The Forest of Fear. And go.
Yes, they're all the same. They've been split wide open.
Not even the same shot. Oh, my favorite characters, the cavemen. Glorious. The rock from the previous episode. So is that the only rock in the cave? The Forest of Fear is in the rock. I'm sorry. But just so you know, when I'm typing, I'm actually taking down notes for the review portion. And I realize I didn't really react much there, but I did notice that that's the first mention of companions in the show. So it's interesting to see how so many of the, I guess you would say, Doctor Who tropes were sort of established in this initial serial. Or it seems that way. I'm sorry. I mean, clearly it's not going to be an actual heavy stone, but it's just like his face. Long time to... Oh, okay. So that's why they focused on it so long. He got maple syrup on him! God, why? I seriously am sorry. I just can't help it.
You understand? Ask the old woman. She will tell what is done.
Unless you killed her. I actually am enjoying this episode a bit more just because of the fact that it's not almost like 90% focused on the frickin' cavemen.
When I sleep, I see things.
What?
Za, the old woman is dead. It must have been as your eyes said it was. Za's gone with them.
What?
Taking them to the cave.
Oh, that was fast. Incredibly fast, actually. Alright. So, yeah. That was the end of that, at least. So that was The Forest of Fear. Overall, liked it better than Cave of Skulls. But there's still the final chapter of this to watch, and that is The Firemaker. So, let's get right into it and begin.
I said this knife has no blood on it. It is a bad knife. It does not show the things it does.
It's a bad knife.
You see them come out. Kill them.
Why?
Our fire is made. But they do not want to tell us.
Then you would not kill them?
They literally just offered to do it if you take them back to the desert.
I do not want to be driven into them.
Susan gonna burn someone.
Grandfather, look!
We're scare the crap out of him.
Alive, Susan. Almost.
Okay, sure, yeah. I got nothing. No sound effects from that whatsoever. Other than the TARDIS.
Now, what is the radiation read, Susan?
It's really normal, Grandfather.
And all of a sudden it spikes. Oh my god! So much radiation. So much radiation. Oh no. Next episode, The Dead Planet. Alright. Okay, so I will be right back in just a minute. Take a little bit of time to finish up my notes here, and I'll be right back. Alright, so The Forest of Fear and The Firemaker. This is unfortunately, probably one of the, well, I mean, this is only the third episode technically, or fourth if you count the pilot that I did, but unfortunately this is probably the more negative episode that I'm going to be talking about. But anyway, before I get into my real overall thoughts, let's get started with my favorite parts of these episodes. Starting with, and it really just spans both of them, and including the beginning part of the An Unearthly Child serial. And it's getting to know the early Doctor, the early phases of the Doctor, as, I mean, they were still writing the character was still being developed, I mean, very early stages, because the Doctor I know now, I mean, they had a long period of time to develop not even necessarily the personality, but sort of the overall character of the Doctor that is, you know, over sort of spans through all the different iterations of the Doctor. So getting to know this one and how he interacts with the different characters, the companions, the people around, it's very alien to me, again, knowing the Doctor as I know him now, but also the Doctor is certainly very alien to just the ways that the companions are at this point. Like, the companions definitely seem to be the more proactive characters, including Susan, who, I mean, although she is from Gallifrey, she's younger and she has interacted with the humans enough that she's, I guess, more inclined to side with them, whereas the Doctor is just very... Not that he doesn't take action necessarily, but it's just very self-preserving is really any of the actions that he seems to take. At least that's the perception I got. But yeah, just overall, and this will probably be a constant throughout the different parts of the show as I get to know the classic era more, is really just getting to know more of the early Doctor. Now, my next favorite part of these two episodes was just the idea of companions. And I mentioned this in the reaction, but I'm pretty sure that this is the first time that the actual word companions was brought up in, I think it was in The Forest of Fear. I believe it was. So, and again, like I mentioned earlier, just, I love the fact that in this first serial, there's several things that are what one would consider now tropes of Doctor Who that are established in these early episodes, including companions, the TARDIS being stuck as the police box, and a few other things. But yeah, just I really appreciate the fact that they didn't really call them anything different back then. It's just they used the term companions, and it's stuck. It's really stuck since then. So yeah, I really like that aspect. My next and final favorite part of these 2 episodes, and this may hurt some people, but my final favorite part was just the helping of Za, or the caveman Za. And I do realize that happened in the Forest of Fear, and this is my last favorite part. But again, this shows the how proactive the companions are, Ian and Barbara and Susan. And through the course of that, it's like the Doctor was, again, just very standoffish. Again, it was the self-preservation idea. He didn't want to be hurt by this caveman who, as the Doctor states, you know, moments ago was chasing them, probably to kill them, or at least he thought it would kill them. I apologize for the sounds my computer keeps making. But yeah, that little sequence I found really enjoyable because, again, it showed the proactive side of those companions. It showed the compassionate side of those companions. And it worked out really well, in my opinion. And again, showing a side of the Doctor that I haven't really seen much of before, at least in this degree. So yeah, those are my favorite parts. It's time to move into my annoyances. And as always, I do recognize that some of these are probably very nitpicky, but they are things that bother me. Starting with, especially during the Forest of Fear, when there's apparently animals around, there are a lot of animal noises that are occurring during dialogue, and the sound mixing doesn't seem to be that great because there were a lot of times where I couldn't really fully tell what they were saying because I forgot to turn the captions on for these episodes because the animal sounds were drowning out the dialogue. So, and that's something that isn't just specific to this show. That's something that happens in a lot of shows, a lot of movies sometimes, a lot of video games even. So it's something that just sort of annoys me no matter what media it's in or what medium it's in. Whenever there are background sounds or just sounds in general that make it so that you can't hear dialogue that you're clearly supposed to be able to hear, or muddles it somewhat, that's just annoying to me personally. Now my next annoyance, and again, this may just be more of me getting used to the early Doctor, and also they were still developing the character of the Doctor. But the fact that seemingly the Doctor considered killing Za, even though he brushed it off as he was going to have Za draw the directions to the TARDIS, which in my opinion was complete BS. But just the idea of the Doctor, like, seriously just considered killing Za, someone who was laying there injured, near death, I just found that very strange. I would say out of character, but again, the character was still developing. So if not for the fact that I have experienced the new era of Doctor Who, plus the 8th Doctor, that would seem, I guess, normal to me, but it doesn't, if that makes sense at all. Hopefully it does. But anyway, moving on from there, my next annoyance, and I guess this sort of plays in with what I mentioned before about how the close-ups were kind of weird and bother me sometimes. Now, again, I do recognize the necessity of close-ups, especially in older film back in the 60s. But there's several times throughout these two episodes, and possibly even before, just maybe not to the same extent, that there are lingering shots that just stay there way too long, or it seems like they're just staying there way too long, some of which are close-ups, but yeah, just those lingering shots just feel weird to me. And don't get me wrong, in filming I understand the necessity of having like a stable shot, just like of one focus or one area for an extended period of time, so to speak. But the times where it occurred, there were several times where it occurred during these stories or during these episodes that, again, just felt like they were lingering too long, whether it's someone just staring or making a face or something like that. It felt entirely unnecessary and annoying to me. But moving on from there, my next annoyance is they take them back to the Cave of Skulls. Why? Why? And I'll go over this more in my overall thoughts of, the episodes, or really the serial as a whole. And again, it's like, as far as the final episode of the serial goes, it's like, I guess it makes sense, that's the Firemaker, and they're kept there for however long. But it didn't make any sense to me. It's like, he puts them back in the Cave of Skulls. Why? Why? It's like, one, they offered to make him fire, but he said no. And I don't know, there was just a lot of logic there that didn't make sense to me. And again, I'm going to touch on this more when I get to my overall thoughts. But my final annoyance was that there were a few times, the one that stood out the most to me being the very end where the TARDIS disappears, where there's just no sound effects. Other than, again, at that point, the TARDIS engine running. But it was like there were people there and they were throwing their spears. There was no sound of impact on the ground. There was no sound of like grunts of effort throwing the spears. It just seemed strange to me that other than the TARDIS sound, there was nothing. And again, there were a few times where it seemed like there should have been a sound, an impact of some sort, but there was none. And I feel like maybe that was just accidentally left out during editing or something like that, having to do with, again, the old style of filming. And I mean, mistakes happen, and who knows, maybe certain sound accidentally got left out. It's hard to say, but it did bother me, the fact that there was just these moments of not complete silence, but things that clearly should have made noise but didn't. So yeah, that's me, and those are my annoyances. No moment of terror, so to speak. Yeah, really none for these two episodes. Oh yeah, as for a question, and this stemmed from the Doctor actually saying, I'm not a doctor. And that makes me question, again, although in the new era of Doctor Who, it's been established that the Doctor chose his name for certain reasons. But back when this originally started, although they referred to him as the Doctor, because, again, Susan called him Dr. I forget if they gave him a first name, but Dr. Foreman, essentially. So they sort of keep referring to him as the Doctor. And obviously in the credits, he's Doctor Who, Dr. Who. But was he originally not a doctor? Because even again in Twice Upon a Time, the Doctor refers to himself as the original, you might say. But again, back in this first serial, was it kind of a joke perhaps, or a running joke, that they called him the Doctor, but he wasn't really. He was just a guy, an older time-traveling man. Could that be the case? I don't know, and maybe I'm just completely misinterpreting it, but that does seem strange to me that he would simply say, I'm not a doctor, if he's referred to as the Doctor. So yeah, that's my question. Was the Doctor originally not a doctor? As for a track of the episode, I actually did have one, episodes. And I don't know if, well, again, this probably is not what it's called or what one refers to them as, but call it essentially the war drums. Like whenever the drum beat kicks in, whether it's during an actual intense scene or not, I really liked the way it played. It was a good beat to me. It really fit with the situation, and it did make, you know, some scenes that, at least to me, weren't done super well. It did add some intensity to it. And I say super well just from my perspective as a young person watching a show from 1963. It's just my perspective. I mean no disrespect by that. But then as for my quote of the episode, and this really goes back to my second favorite part having to do with the mention of companions. And it's when the Doctor says, and unfortunately I'm forgetting the full context of it, but essentially he says, makes companions of all of us. And then he refers, you know, uses the word companions once or twice more. And the reason that, again, that quote stands out to me so much is because of the use of the term companions and how it has clearly stuck with the show since then, since 1963. They're always the companions. And yeah, I couldn't think of a better quote to fit there. And, well, honestly, I couldn't really think of any other lines that really stood out as super quotable to me, at least for these two episodes. But yeah, that's the deal there. As for theory, don't really have one at this point, but, well, unless you include the title of the next serial, which I'll get to in a minute. But before we do that, my overall thoughts on not only these two episodes, but the serial as a whole. For these two episodes, I feel like the third one, The Forest of Fear, it was relatively strong. It had a good mix of the main characters intermingled with the cavemen, who I'm still not a huge fan of them, but it was better than the previous episode, The Cave of Skulls, where like 90% of what's happening on screen was the cavemen. So yeah, because of that and the fact that basically all of my favorite parts came from that episode, you know, I like that. But then it comes to the Firemaker, and I honestly feel like that episode didn't need to exist. I feel like everything that happened and the way it was kind of resolved could have all happened in The Forest of Fear. And really, just to get into my overall thoughts, I feel like this serial should have only been 3 episodes long. I feel like it should have been, you know, An Unearthly Child, Cave of Skulls, and maybe mix The Forest of Fear and the Firemaker together. Or, like, An Unearthly Child is by itself, and then those last 2 episodes are a mix of Cave of Skulls, Forest of Fear, and the Firemaker. Because, and this is something that was mentioned by some of the commenters, some people that were saying they didn't really care for these older original episodes, that, you know, they're slow-paced, and I can definitely see that. I don't know that it's the slow pace that bothers me, but it does feel like there's a lot of padding. Or at the very least, what feels to me like just unnecessary plot. Like plot that didn't need to be there. Again, they go back to the Cave of Skulls. That was not necessary at all. It just seems like, again, had there been that possibility of going back to the desert near the TARDIS, they could have shown them how to make fire. And then it could have been wrapped up from there. It's like they wanted to leave, but the cavemen didn't want them to go, and then they escape in the TARDIS, and boom, it's over. But instead, we got this whole extra episode that just lingered on and on. And even that last chase where, I mean, I understand why they had to do, like, you know, some of the camera tricks where it was clearly just the people sort of like moving up and down in place to simulate running. But that went on it felt like a long time. I don't know how long it actually was, but it felt like a long time. And again, that was just padding. That didn't need to be there. So again, I feel like had this first serial been just 3 episodes, they cut out a lot of the fluff and a lot of the I just don't care dialogue between all the cavemen, it would have been more solid. It would have been more enjoyable. I don't know, maybe someone's done a supercut, or like not a director's cut necessarily, but a fan cut of these episodes that make it better overall. But yeah, just in the end, I think that was its biggest downfall. Again, I appreciate the fact that, you know, this is one of the older shows. It's from 1963. They were working on a smaller budget. And they were, I mean, they had a lot of constraints they had to work with. But the length of time that they go to on this just felt unnecessary, and that's what kind of kills it for me. So, as a whole, I honestly don't really like the first serial of An Unearthly Child. The first episode, most definitely, I did enjoy that. There were elements of the following 3 episodes that I did like, but as a whole, it's just really weak, in my opinion. Again, even though I've said this 5 times already, betrayed by the fact that it's overly long and didn't need to be, at least in my personal opinion. So yeah, I apologize if that's not what you wanted to hear from me regarding, you know, this first serial of classic Doctor Who. I'm definitely in this for the long haul, though. I am definitely going to be checking out, if possible, all of the stories of the classic Doctor Who era. And in fact, the next time we're going to be getting into the Daleks. The second serial in the first Doctor's era. And, well, as I mentioned at the end of that last episode, the next episode is The Dead Planet. And apparently the Daleks serial is 7 episodes long. So, needless to say, that serial is going to have to be cut up into probably 2 or 3 parts as far as these Discovering Classic Doctor Who videos go. I will aim for more so, I'll try and do 2 parts if I can. It'll most likely be 3 though. But regardless, I hope you all have enjoyed the beginning of my journey through classic Doctor Who. Again, I apologize if anything I said insulted someone, especially if you're a big fan of classic Doctor Who. This is a readjustment period for me, because while you all may have grown up with the classic Doctor and then got to experience new Doctor Who, this is coming from the perspective of someone who loves the new era and really hasn't experienced the classics at all until now. So, again, I'm just going to give my honest feelings on these, and hopefully that doesn't upset too many of you all. But before I end this episode, just so you all know, if you want to check out more episodes like this, you can go to the PapaKennMedia Patreon. There will be a link in the description down below, and as well at the end of this video. And for as little as $1 a month, you can become a patron, and you can get access to all of the PapaKennMedia videos as soon as they're uploaded. As soon as I upload a video, and if it has an extended version, I will link to that as well. Well, that will be linked in the YouTube description of the video. But as soon as they're uploaded, they're available to the patrons, and you get to watch them and, you know, at your leisure, rather. Well in advance, anywhere from a day to a week or 2 ahead of time. So, if you're interested in that at all, go check it out. Otherwise, everyone, thank you so much for being here again. I appreciate you all. I'm repeating myself, but I appreciate you all being here for the beginning of my journey through classic Doctor Who. And until next time, for the beginning of the Daleks, which is The Dead Planet, I'm Papa Ken, and I will see you in the next video. Allons-y!